Sam Kinison was born on December 8, 1953, in Yakima, Washington, into a family deeply entrenched in Pentecostal Christianity. His father, Samuel Earl Kinison, was a traveling preacher, a calling that would heavily influence young Sam's early life. The Kinisons were not wealthy, and the family moved frequently, living a nomadic existence that left Sam feeling rootless and somewhat alienated from his peers. This sense of being an outsider, a theme that would later permeate his comedy, was deeply ingrained in him from an early age. Kinison's childhood was marked by more than just geographical instability. When he was just 3 years old, a devastating accident occurred that would change his life forever. Kinison was struck by a truck, an incident that resulted in a serious head injury. Many who knew him later in life speculated that this traumatic event contributed to the intense and unpredictable nature that would come to define him. Whether or not this was true, it was clear that the young Sam Kinison was shaped by experiences that were far from typical. As a teenager, Kinison struggled to find his place in the world. His father's death when Sam was just 11 years old left a void that he struggled to fill. In the shadow of his father's passing, Kinison turned to the church, initially finding solace in the world of Pentecostal preaching. He followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a preacher himself in his late teens. For several years, Kinison traveled the country, delivering sermons with a passion that hinted at the intensity he would later bring to the stage as a comedian. However, the restrictive nature of the ministry clashed with Kinison's growing desire for freedom and self-expression. The firebrand preacher began to feel stifled by the very institution that had once given him purpose. By the late 1970s, Kinison's disillusionment with the church was complete. He walked away from the ministry, turning his back on the life of a preacher to pursue a radically different path: stand-up comedy. Kinison's early foray into comedy was anything but glamorous. He struggled to find his footing in the world of stand-up, performing in small clubs and open mics where he was often met with indifference or outright rejection. His comedic style was still evolving, and he had yet to develop the distinctive voice that would later set him apart. During these lean years, Kinison lived hand-to-mouth, often sleeping in his car or crashing on friends' couches. Despite the hardships, Kinison was undeterred. He continued to perform, honing his craft and slowly building a reputation as a fearless and uncompromising comedian. His big break came in 1980 when he moved to Los Angeles and became a regular at the Comedy Store, a legendary comedy club that served as a launching pad for many of the era's top comedians. It was here, in the crucible of the Comedy Store, that Sam Kinison began to refine the persona that would make him famous. Kinison's act was unlike anything audiences had seen before. He was loud, abrasive, and unapologetically raw. His routines often touched on taboo subjects such as religion, sex, and relationships, delivered with a ferocity that bordered on the manic. But it wasn't just the content of Kinison's comedy that set him apart, it was his delivery. Kinison didn't just tell jokes, he screamed them, his voice rising to a primal howl that could convey both fury and desperation. This scream would become his trademark, a sonic embodiment of the rage and frustration that fueled much of his humor. In 1985, Kinison's career took a major leap forward when he appeared on HBO's Rodney Dangerfield's 9th annual Young Comedian special. His performance was electrifying, and it catapulted him into the national spotlight. Audiences were both shocked and fascinated by this wild, unpredictable comedian who seemed to channel his inner demons into every performance. Following this breakthrough, Kinison released his first comedy album, Louder Than Hell, which was met with critical acclaim and further established him as a rising star in the comedy world. As Kinison's star rose, so too did the intensity of his personal life. He became known not only for his on-stage antics but for his off-stage behavior as well. Kinison embraced the rock and roll lifestyle with a vengeance, indulging in heavy drinking, drug use, and a series of tumultuous relationships. His life became a blur of excess, with the line between performer and persona increasingly blurred. Kinison's struggles with substance abuse were no secret. His erratic behavior, fueled by drugs and alcohol, often led to trouble. He was known for showing up late to performances, or not showing up at all. There were incidents where he would go on stage visibly intoxicated, delivering slurred and disjointed sets that were a far cry from the sharp, biting humor that had made him famous. Despite multiple attempts to get clean, Kinison found it difficult to escape the grip of addiction. The darker aspects of Kinison's comedy also drew criticism. His routines were often controversial, touching on topics that many considered off-limits. Religious groups, feminists, and other social activists frequently targeted Kinison for what they saw as offensive and misogynistic material. But Kinison remained unapologetic, insisting that his comedy was a form of social commentary, a way to confront uncomfortable truths head-on. He relished the controversy, seeing it as a sign that he was doing something right. To Kinison, comedy was about pushing boundaries, even if it meant alienating some of his audience. Kinison's personal relationships were as tumultuous as his career. He was married 3 times, and each relationship was marked by drama and dysfunction. His second marriage to Terry Mars was particularly stormy, with the couple frequently clashing over Kinison's infidelities and substance abuse. The marriage ended in divorce in 1989, leaving Kinison emotionally scarred and increasingly dependent on drugs and alcohol to numb the pain. Despite the chaos in his personal life, Kinison continued to work, releasing more comedy albums and making numerous television appearances. His 1991 album, Live from Hell, showcased a more introspective side of Kinison, as he began to explore the darker aspects of his life and career. The album was well received, and it seemed that Kinison was on the verge of a new chapter in his career. By 1992, Sam Kinison appeared to be turning a corner. He had managed to stay sober for a period, and his comedy was evolving, becoming more reflective and personal. In April of that year, Kinison married his third wife, Malika Suri, in a ceremony that was as wild and unconventional as the man himself. The couple seemed poised for a fresh start, with Kinison looking forward to a future that promised stability and success. However, just 6 days after his wedding, tragedy struck. On April 10, 1992, Kinison was driving to a gig in Laughlin, Nevada, when his car was struck head-on by a pickup truck driven by a 17-year-old who had been drinking. The accident occurred on a desolate stretch of U.S. Route 95, near Needles, California. Kinison's brother and manager, Bill, was following behind in another vehicle and witnessed the crash. The impact of the collision was devastating. Kinison suffered severe head and internal injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 38 years old. The driver of the pickup truck survived but was later charged with vehicular manslaughter. The news of Kinison's death sent shockwaves through the comedy world. Fans and fellow comedians were stunned by the sudden loss of a talent who had so much more to offer. In the days following his death, tributes poured in from across the entertainment industry. Many reflected on Kinison's impact on comedy, remembering him as a performer who was fearless in his approach, willing to tackle subjects that others wouldn't dare touch. His death was seen as a tragic end to a life that had been lived with an intensity few could match.